All right, you guys, welcome back to the first episode of Perfect People Podcast. We have not recorded an episode in 2 years, so that's why I'm calling it the first one. And I'm extremely excited about today's guest. And so we have a guest, and he's known as IAM, and he's the author of a book titled "Dad, I Love You," discussing how to love an absent father. And so this is going to be a really great episode, and I'm excited because I was blown away. I actually was watching Social Proof podcast, and I found this gentleman, and just the clip that I saw that was posted kind of just really had my mind going. And I thought this would be a perfect topic for whether you're a young man, you're a grown man, whether I even found value in it as a woman. And so I'm extremely excited to introduce I Am. And so with that being said, everybody, welcome. Before we even get in, we always like to do a check-in. I'm a strong, avid believer of like mental health and our mindset and thinking of just the energy that we're carrying with us every day and how we feel. And so we always do a check-in. And today, I guess I want to ask you, um, number one, how are you feeling? How was your week? And then maybe you could share something you learned this week, just in general about yourself, about life, because I feel like you're a lifelong learner.
Peace and blessings, Point. How you feeling?
I'm feeling good. Go ahead. Sorry. So
I, you
did
know, I always like to. I always like to ask that first. The exchange of energy.
mhm.
Man, my weekend so far was a challenge of faith. And do I believe what I really believe in?
Mhm.
But so far it's been a necessary one. It's been a good one too. What I learned today was trauma can dictate how a person loves, how a person embraces, how a person feels. But trauma can dictate almost every decision a person makes, even to the extent that they believe they're making a rational decision, but they're not.
Mhm.
And only somewhat to a degree can you hold a person responsible for that because it is a choice whether you choose to live with the trauma, to deal with the trauma. But even to that extent, you can't fault a person because once trauma has entered someone's life, it could take a set of challenges for a person to even realize how to even get past that, especially depending on how powerful the trauma even was. So trying not to hold that accountable to that person's heart.
That's good. That's good. I like that. I always heard it saying. I like what you said about it can affect things all like every part of our life, and not to charge it to their heart. That reminds me of the saying where they say, "Charge it to my heart." I mean, my head, and not to my heart. I believe. I think that's the saying. I don't know if you ever heard of it.
Yes.
And so that's kind of what that made me think of. But that's such a powerful topic because all of us are carrying some kind of trauma, and it's showing up in different ways of our life. But it's like not faulting, but also making sure that we take our day-to-day life and really see and be present in that moment of like how do we navigate that trauma. So that was really good. um should I share mine, or we just know? Oh.
Go forward.
So today I'm feeling pretty good. And I'm really excited about being back. I think one thing that I learned for myself this week is that sometimes you just have to go even when you feel like you may not be ready. And so today is a true testament of going without feeling like you're ready. Like it kind of reminds me of like the cars when they start in the winter and they tell you like, you're supposed to like let your car like warm up. Sometimes you just have to go to work and you just got to get in there and go. I feel like that as far as coming back to the podcast, being here, and just going. Don't think about it too much. Just be in the moment, and just be ready to embrace the unknown. And so I would say that's how I'm feeling today. But enough about me. I really want to really get into this book, and it was so many great things that you brought. Like honestly, I feel like even I was telling you before the interview, I felt like I would need like 2 or 3 interviews to really unpack some of the information and different topics that you covered. But I want to open up with you sharing who is I am, and where'd you get that name from, and what does that name mean to you? Because that's a powerful name.
Well, on the most simplest term, my entire name is Ibrahim Mallese. So while I was incarcerated, the most juvenile thing, me and my guys, we at the work site, and we're playing around. We're saying, if your name was your abbreviated version of your name, what would your name be? And some people's name was like John or just a bunch of vowels or a bunch of consonants. So it came time for me, and one of my guys, Kenneth Johnson, he was like, "Bro, you know your name is IAM, right?" And I was like, "I guess it is." But on a more deeper level, in the book of Exodus, when Moses had the conversation with the burning bush, and the bush gave him an order to follow, and he was asked the bush, when I go to them and they ask me who sent them, who do I say? In English translation, the bush says them, just say I am. Knowing our connection to the Most High, us black people, the original people, the God of the planet and the universe, we having that direct connection to the Most High, us being direct descendants of the Most High itself. Each one of us are miniature I ams from the larger I am. That's me embracing my lineage, not just as a black person, period, but as a God being. And on top of it, we get so stuck up in these identities of thinking about who we want to become or who we once were. We never take enough time to really sit and wonder about who we are at this moment. In African literature, we're taught that time is always transcending one another. In every second, you live in the past, you live in the present, you live in the future. So there's really no such thing as once was or will be. You're always in the present moment of the past and the future. So I am is always you being in connection with who you are at that moment and not being hung up on the second that just passed or the second to come.
Oh, that's powerful. Wow. We can get so caught up in what happened in our past or who we're gonna become that we miss the opportunity of right now. And I love the fact that your name kind of just reminds you of just like right now, who are you? You know, in this very moment, in this very time, who you are, and also coming from God, right? Like I think sometimes when we think of life in our own kind of strength, it kind of limits us. But when we notice that, when we understand that we come from something greater that is, and that we are, like you said, miniature I ams, that's when you really start to unpack the true power of who you are and who you were created to be. And so that's powerful. Even to have those initials in your name is like that's powerful. So I was reading the book, and the first thing that I came, first of all, I want to say the introduction of just talking about your childhood was so powerful. But for those, I don't want to give anything away. Can you just kind of open up and talk about being from Philly and what that was like, and kind of like your childhood and your introduction to understanding the world?
Being from Philly originally, hey, shout out to Philly. Shout out to every part of Philly from north,
Okay.
south, west. We ain't got no east. Southwest, northwest, center city. Hey, just shout out to Philly. Being from Philly is a bitter, sweet experience
Hmm.
because being the city known as a city of brotherly love, the environment you're brought up in makes you figure out over time that this is a hypocritical statement.
Mm.
Because it's not saying brothers don't have love for each other, but the intensity that we grow up in, the dynamics that we've been forced upon, can make you express everything but that love. Like my first friend, I remember losing. I think I was 8 years old, and I found out he was gone when I see my mom's crying over a bathtub reading a news clip article of him getting clipped. So
Wow.
growing up already as a young age, knowing that you can go at any moment here, and then as a little kid, not really having a construct of what death is, but knowing that there's a chance you'll be here one day but gone the next. At the same time, you still love your city is bittersweet within itself.
Hmm. Oh, wow. I didn't even know that it was called brotherly love, but that's a powerful statement to even, or like a title to have over a state, right? Like being there, looking for that brotherly love, and then experiencing also like the culture of like just your surroundings in your neighborhood. Um, I know. So even thinking about that, I know you just shared that you lost a friend at 8 years old. And as I was reading, I noticed that your mom, she had like this love for you, right? Like this protective kind of thing where she noticed that things were happening in school, and so she took you out and decided to homeschool you, right? Which was like, I was like, whoa. So she was like ahead of her time of just being like, listen, I think that I need to, in a way, make sure that you're good, right? Like the school system may not be serving you, or maybe she felt like she wanted to put you in a space that was more safe. Can you talk to us about how you were homeschooled, and how, like, how was that for you? And then how did you, even being homeschooled, how did you find your way in the streets if you were homeschooled and you were kind of out of the school system?
Well, I first started doing homeschool, I think, around the time I was in second grade. And by this point, I had already been to, I don't even know how many elementary schools I'd have been to by that point. I only really remember three of them. One elementary school, I was only there for maybe 4 hours.
Oh my goodness.
And my mom said, nah, this ain't it. You got to go.
what what happened? All right, sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
It's like October 30th or October 31st. It's around Halloween time because kids got on costumes.
Mm-hmm.
Even though we weren't raised technically Muslim, even though we were raised under Muslim guidelines, we didn't celebrate Halloween. So I was the only child there that didn't have a Halloween costume, which I really didn't stress because I would ask to go out, not because I really care for the festivities, but really just because I want the candy.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a kid there, and he was making fun of me because of my name being Ibrahim. Even though Philadelphia has a strong Islamic influence, there really wasn't too many people running around with the name Ibrahim. So, he would make fun of me, talking about I was like Abraham Lincoln. And even at the time, I knew I didn't like being compared to no white man. So after only so much time and just hearing him in the back of my ear, I flipped one of the school desks on him.
Oof.
And they called my mom's, and she was like, "Oh yeah, it's time to go. Time to go."
So from that point on, you were homeschooled. What did that look like?
So the
Okay.
last school I went to, I believe, was Penrose or Patterson Elementary.
Mm-hmm.
The last event was I got to fighting. I lied to my mom's back then about what happened because I didn't want to rat on the person I got into it with. But I got to fighting with somebody around the wintertime. It snows in Philly. And even though we have salt trucks, I believe they're called, that melt
Mm-hmm.
the ice, the schools are one of the last places they melt the ice at. So you got a lot of ice where we have recess at. I'm sliding around the ice. There's another boy. I started to fight with him. He pushed me. I fell and busted my head on the ice. So, my mom's them trying to get to the bottom of it. I know who did it, but I told her I don't know who pushed me. I didn't want to rat on dude.
Mm-hmm.
So, my mom's taking it further, going to the principal. Why ain't nobody been found? Why ain't found a word of my son? Me not finna tell on him.
Mm-hmm.
She said, I'm just going to take you out of school altogether. Part because I keep putting out of schools, but at some point I'm getting put out of this school probably anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So I was homeschooled from there on. I was already in the neighborhood by then. So even though I got pulled out of school, I still got friends in the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, you got to fight. Like, this is Philly, we a fighting city. I'm confident to say about 80 to 85% of the minimum people in Philly know how to actually fight.
Mm-hmm.
I was no exception to that.
So fighting city. So at this time, your second grade, was your dad still in your life, or what?
Nah, he was gone by the time I was 5.
Okay, sorry. So let's rewind. Sorry. So what happened with that? Because that's really, I'm guessing. I want to think is like the center of all of this kind of transpiring, right? So what happened with you and your dad to even get to this point?
You talking about when I was a kid or
Mm-hmm. Like
that moment?
before? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, my pops wasn't just active that much anyway, but he was around whenever he was just around. Mainly, he came around really to see my mom's. So, I just caught the back end of all that. But it was one particular day he came over, and it just felt odd. Like his usual routine and what he did, it just switched.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was a good reader of my mom's. Me and my mom's always been close, so I could always tell when something's just on my mom's mind that just don't feel right. And once I seen his reaction after he left, I went to my mom's and I asked when my dad coming back, and she just never answered me, as I remember it.
Wow. So at this point, dad is left and mom didn't really give you an answer. Were you able to get an answer later, or
Nah.
no? So it just kind of streamed into you not having an answer. You're going to school. you get into these fights, different things are just kind of coming up, right? Um, so I guess that brings me to the chapter of me thinking about your validation, right? So you talked about like you started searching for your identity. What did that look like to you? Because trying to find, you don't have your dad. You're living in a house. You did have siblings, right? You had two
At the time,
sisters.
at the time I had an older sister. My little sister wasn't born until we moved to Atlanta.
Okay, so you had one older sister. You're trying to figure it out, and you're looking for validation. You're trying to find your identity. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because I think I think every kid goes through this to some extent or another. So, what happened with you trying to find your identity and validation?
Well, realizing about why you're looking for validation as an adult is different than when you was a child.
Mm-hmm.
When you're a child, you're just looking for acceptance. You're looking for somewhere to belong at. Naturally, the first place that's supposed to start is in your family. I don't have no pops. My mom's got to work, so I don't really see her much. We not close to our family anyway. My big sister really served as my surrogate mother, even though she's only a few years older than me. But I'm trying to figure myself out. I'm trying to figure out, okay, who am I supposed to belong with? Who am I supposed to stand with? I'm trying to understand myself at the same time, not even understanding these things in the first place. So, the first thing almost all dudes do is they group up with other dudes. Whether it's
Yep.
at a younger age or older age, I started young. I had my own group when we was at school. We used to, I'm not going to say we used to pick on people, but we used to get on people. We'll just say that. We get on people. But we didn't just pick on weak people. We just got on people that we didn't agree with.
Mm-hmm.
But this is how that rolled into that part of our life.
Mm-hmm.
Me personally, mine's a little different because me having an Ethiopian background, I already know I don't look like nobody around me.
Yeah.
Then this is around the time that the 9/11 events just took place. So everybody's now finding out what terrorists are. Muslims are being put in one particular group. Because of the ethnic history that Ethiopians have with the Middle East, we favor the people that you would think fit the Muslim background. So now I become subject to the terrorist jokes. I don't even know what none of this is supposed to mean.
Mm.
So I'm looking for a physical identity as long as with an emotional identity. And then
Mm.
my mom's being who she is, love her to death, but she's never been a real affectionate person.
Mm.
So now I'm deprived of the affection, the comforting affection I get from my moms. I'm deprived of the disciplinary and justified affection I get from my pops.
Mm.
So I'm trying to find balance, but I'm angry all the time.
Mm.
And this is the only thing I know how to feel. So that translates to me getting hostile from running out to school, throwing stuff at a teacher, going at a teacher.
Just different things coming up. Wow. And then also, I know you were just talking about even, so you're saying like you're just trying to find out your identity, trying to figure out where you fit in physically, emotionally. And then also, I know you talked a little bit about even going into sports, like, because you started to try to take on these roles that they said were masculine or something that portrayed a man. And so you were looking like, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to show up as an athlete, or I'm supposed to show up as a fighter, right? And then you talk about how that kind of goes into you even experiencing just the different relationships that you built as far as like girlfriends, but also even as friendships. And that really stuck out to me because you were just sharing about like how it came into your loyalty, right? So this is where you started developing a sense of like loyalty. And I was just like, it was such an interesting way to look at it. Can you describe more what you talk about when you were like with your best friend and your loyalty as far as that, and even your loyalty to like your bros, right? Like which kind of goes into like I don't know how to say it better, but like maybe how they have like the bros over hoes kind of concept now in today's society. I'm sorry, this, I don't know.
Hey, let me be the first to say that I've never supported that slogan.
Okay,
Not a day
okay.
in my life.
No, okay.
No,
So
that is the next. Whoever gets mad, you get mad. But I don't support nothing that sounds like homosexuality. That
okay,
sounds very gay to me. So I've never
okay.
supported that. Now, what I would never do is turn against one of my guys for a female.
Got it.
That's a
Okay.
different concept.
Yep. So explain that a little bit. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, after my pops left, I had this unhealthy attachment to everybody in my life. To the extent I said I would never leave nobody. I don't care who they are. The only way me and this person will separate, they gotta leave me. I
Mhm.
don't want nobody to feel how I felt, that abandoned feeling. even as an adult, you somewhat deal with those feelings now of needing to be there for people, almost to the extent it falls into like a savior complex. Like you actually start to tell
Yeah.
yourself that these people won't know how to survive if you're not in their life, even though it's not real. But my loyalty I developed to my guy was this was who I was attached to. I didn't want to be attached to nobody else. I know the homo stuff, but
Yeah.
I
No.
didn't want to let nobody in. I didn't want to give nobody no room to hurt me to that aspect. So if you're
Mhm.
in, you're in. If you're out, you're out.
Mhm.
So not knowing that the older you grow, you're supposed to expand your relationships and even dissolve for one. I took it personally when my guys started to separate because they need to socialize and get to know other people started to take place. I didn't understand that. Only thing I'm seeing is you abandoning me, you leaving me yourself. So that automatically translates to hostile emotions that started to take out on others around me.
Wow. Yeah, no, I want to say I didn't know how to explain it, but that makes yeah, that's a great way to put it, and I brought that up because I feel like I wonder if a lot of males even into today's society kind of gravitate to the loyalty of their homeboys, right? Like you even talk about like joining a gang or like, and this is kind of like culture even today of just kind of finding that loyalty with your friends to the point where it's like that's your safe space, right? And that you all kind of understand each other. You talk about even some of your friends in the book who had other issues going on with their dad too, whether it was their dad was in their life or even if their dad and he was like physically there but not emotionally there, or maybe he was even absent, right? And then you even go into the difference of that. Can you tell us the difference? What is the difference between a dad being like emotionally absent and physically absent? Like you explain that really well.
There were two one of the same concepts. Like if you're emotionally absent, in a way you're physically absent because you're missing what's going on in your child's life.
Mm-hmm.
Vice versa, if you're physically absent, you're emotionally absent also because you're not even there to see what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
They're two one of the same concepts. Now the difference between them is the emotionally absent means you're there probably performing your natural roles that you're supposed to as a male and you being the provider. And we're talking on the physical level of being the provider, financially, clothes, food, shelter. Maybe y'all live in the same household, I don't know. But for the most part, you're there, so your child can be able to say is, "Oh, I know where my dad's at, and I can go there at any time."
Yeah.
But the emotional absent part plays in how you were groomed, like how you communicate. Like there's this thing that we do call is my way or the highway. To a sense, I do agree with that because one, if I'm taking care of you, there's not really much negotiation on anything that's going on.
Mm.
But it gets to a level to the extent where you could feel like their feelings don't matter at all. Like there is nothing we have to talk about, which is not real. Like if this is a situation that can affect you, you have some insight on this. You should have some type of say so in this. And it even goes as far as saying like we have expectations over our children.
Mm-hmm.
But do we ever ask if our children have expectations over us? If you're
Ooh.
not emotionally sound within yourself, you getting the honest feedback from your child can lead to a hostile situation real quick
Yeah.
from you.
Yeah.
And an emotionally absent just means you feel because I'm providing food, shelter, clothes, all the other things you go throughout your day doesn't matter, which
Mm-hmm.
is not real. But then when you're a physically absent father, and that's where the essence of this book even starts from, you miss all of that. You don't even have no real input on what's going on. You even rob your child of the foreknowledge of even knowing where you're at or anything about you.
Wow. Yeah. That part of the book really resonated even with me. I know I'm a girl, but um, like I said, your book was so powerful that it even touched me because I didn't get to know my dad until 25. I knew my dad. My dad was in my life, but I didn't get to spend time with him until 25. And so that's when I started to realize just that presence of being able to see what your dad is doing and actually hear the stories and stuff. it really does have power. And so I think sometimes even when parents are, because growing up, it was like I had a dad in my life, of course, but it wasn't until I was able to be in close quarters with them that we understand. And so it's so important to break down a difference, right? Because sometimes dads can be like, well, I'm here with my kid, but being able to express or being able to connect and, like you said, hear your kid and find out the expectations is such a powerful thing. And so when you broke that down, I was like, I think that that part of your book is really going to enlighten even dads who may be in a physical home with their kid and parents who are not in a physical home with their child.
Well, in
What
order
advice would
for,
you get? Hmm?
if you don't
Go
mind
ahead.
me saying,
Yep.
the way you break that, you have to break that stigma is there has to be a level of vulnerability and accountability with yourself. You have to learn how to reconcile with yourself. The part
Yeah.
that makes it so hard for people to be emotionally vulnerable, especially with the individuals in their life, is they haven't even found that vulnerability within their own being. They don't face their own demons. That's how most people end up alcoholics. That's how most people end up drug addicts. That's how
Hmm.
most people end up sex addicts. That's how most people end up becoming workaholics, because it takes away all the time of you having to have an actual conversation with yourself and not just asking yourself what is wrong with you, but what can we do to finally get past this. So if
Yeah.
you don't have that vulnerability within you, you're definitely not going to express that with your child. Like, there are conversations I have with my son, he's 8 years old, that and that moment, it's a little painful with me to discuss it, but I know if I don't have this conversation with my son,
Hmm.
he could end up becoming subject to the same emotions. Like, I don't hide from my son the relationship me and his mother have with each other. I
Hmm.
don't even pretend. I tell my son with no hesitation, this is not a cordial relationship.
Okay.
The relationship me and her have with each other is always going to dictate how often me and you see each other, spend time with each other. But this is not no happy situation we got going on. And I make sure he knows that.
Hmm.
But I also make sure to tell him that things happen in both our lives that causes us to get to that point. For the
Hmm.
most part, I'm past that, but she's not past it.
Hmm.
And I make sure I try to explain to my best of knowledge, don't hold that against her. She just haven't reached that place yet. Hopefully she does. Maybe she never does. But there's always that possibility. But I'm vulnerable with myself enough to be able to have that conversation with my child. Like, I let my son know I have fears. One of
Hmm.
my fears in particular, I plan on taking him with me to face that fear and explain to him I'm able to face this fear because I got you with me. And me being afraid is not going to overshadow the fact I know I have to be here for you.
Yeah, can we ask you? Can if you don't, you can say no. But what is one? Like I know you say you have that fear that you want to overcome. Maybe you don't want to share. Maybe you do. But if you're open to, what's one of the fears that you would like your son to witness you facing? Because I think a lot of dads can learn a lot from hearing this.
One of those fears was, and it might sound so juvenile, but
No.
I was afraid of the dark severely when I was a child, like to the point I come close to being panic attacks. When I was like 3 or 4, I had a babysitter who locked me in the basement for hours,
Mm.
and that always played in my mind.
Mhm.
So now I'm not too much bothered with it.
Mhm.
But like the other night, I wanted to go into a dark space, and I could find myself becoming afraid real quick. So now I plan on going back to that place, but I want my son with me. One, because I don't know what his feelings are towards the dark, but I know all it takes is a split second to become afraid of it.
Mhm.
But I know if my son watches me face one of my greatest fears that I had since I was a child, that will inspire him to get to that place, especially when he becomes a man, to face his fear.
Yes. Wow, no, that is powerful. I know you said it's juvenile, but I don't think it is at all. And I think that when your son goes with you to experience that moment, he will remember to go into dark places and not be afraid to bring his inner light too. Like, it's very symbolic. Even though you say it's something that's just something that you're doing is small, I believe that that's a symbolic action of like stepping into your fears and being a light in the darkness, right? Or like stepping in even when you can't see anything, and then taking him, I can only imagine what heights he'll be able to climb after doing that with you. So thank you for sharing that because that's powerful. And some of us may not be scared of the physical dark, but I know that a lot of us are scared of dark places in our life in general, right? And so it's important to be able to identify those, so that we can go into the darkness at all time and not be afraid to be a light in that space or to conquer our fear with that.
Yeah.
So that was really powerful.
Yeah, one of the things that started helping me embrace the dark is when you realize what the relation of darkness is to people in general.
Mm.
Like the first thing we read in the Bible, what do you read? Out of the light, out of the darkness came light.
Mm-hmm.
You learn about the science of the universe. 90 to 93% of the universe is darkness. The stars, the planets make up very small percentages of light, but the rest of this is a vast of blackness. Excuse me.
It's
Even when
okay.
you look at the people of the planet,
Mm-hmm.
majority of the planet, there's only a small percentage of the planet that even will fit the description of being called a white person, Caucasus descent, or just a pale pigmented person. But the
Mm.
rest of the planet is covered in some variation of melanin. Most people are even dark, being my skin tone and darker. Even when you close your eyes, there's darkness. When you're inside the womb, there's no lights, there's nothing flashing. There's no, technically speaking, red blood cells, pink organs. Everything is just dark. So from the
Mm-hmm.
beginning of your creation, even the beginning of the universe, everything comes from darkness. So to have a fear of the darkness is also, in a sense, having a fear of both the beginning and the end, because everything begins in darkness, everything ends in darkness.
Wow.
So being and able to embrace that darkness, there's a part of life that you'll rob yourself of because you're avoiding it. When this is the realest part of you. Even if you turn off all the lights in the room, everything becomes dark. Everything has to return back to darkness because, in essence, everything comes from blackness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So it's what do I want to say? Sorry. um, Overtaking darkness can change your world, like, or change the way that you view the world. So thank you for sharing that powerful, just the idea of just darkness. So I want to go into, so I work in education, right? And I often hear, I know you
Really?
mentioned it, but
Was you a teacher?
kinda, I'm a restorative coach, so I go and build relationships with kids. And what I see is a lot of different traumas that come up. Specifically, a lot of black males are kicked out of school, and so I work closely with them a lot. Females too, or young women too, but I really find myself working with like young males. And Lord, I need some water. So, but one thing I do, I noticed from your book, you were saying, when people be like, "Oh, you're lucky I'm not your dad," you would be like, "My dad's lucky that he isn't my dad," or you would respond in those ways, say, "I don't have a dad," like. And these are kind of the themes that I hear in school, right? Even from when I was working with elementary, I would hear kids that are 5 years old, and I'm like, "I'm gonna tell your dad," and they're like, "I don't have a dad." And so, um, I guess, can you tell your healing journey of, like, how did you get to the place of going from um dismissing that concept of your dad to owning that, and then also what advice would you give young males facing this now in this space?
First, I want to mention something I heard recently. There was a
Mm-hmm.
guy, his name's KT, and he said there's a difference between healing and rejuvenation.
Mm.
Healing is you just building upon a wound. So even though you may be repairing it, that wound is always there.
Mm-hmm.
But that rejuvenation is the cycle of creating a new life. I may have said that wrong, but on those paths. At first, I wanted this book to be a healing journey, but now I've decided I want this book to be a rejuvenation. Because healing just means you're building upon that wound, but the root of it is always going to be the wound. And wounds, if we're not careful, can be reopened.
Mm.
But rejuvenation is you moving on to a whole new stage. This wound doesn't even exist no more.
That's powerful. So really
For
getting
me,
in. Go ahead.
no, you're all right. Advice I'd give a young male is just embrace it. Like, one, accept the fact that this, almost all young males think this. At some point, we think this is our dad's fault that he's gone. It's our fault he's gone. It's our mom's fault. In some instances, mothers do stand in the way of fathers being there. That is true. Is it necessarily her fault? 50-50. 50-50, because one, the 50 part being her fault is she stood in the way of a relationship, but the other 50 is she's probably dealing with the pain within herself that she never got through.
Mm-hmm.
The advice I have is don't look for nobody to blame in this. That's not going to make you feel better. It's not even going to justify it. It's not even going to fix it. Start looking for ways to embrace it, not leave it. Don't ignore it. Because ignoring it is going to create a wound. I know we hear this thing saying time heals all wounds, and that is absolute nonsense in certain contexts.
Mm-hmm.
In some areas, time can make the wound just stretch and stretch to the point that you're trying to put stitches in a Grand Canyon.
Wow.
So I say don't get away from it. Embrace it as much as possible. Try your best to humanize the situation. When it's all said and done, you don't live in his heart. You don't live in your heart. You don't live in the hearts of nobody else. The heart is like the darkness, and the heart is also like the ocean. You never know what's in it until light is shone upon it, and then you never know what's in it until it rises to the surface. You can't judge the heart until you can see it into its entirety. You don't know what made him leave.
Mm-hmm.
But don't never attribute to yourself. They're just circumstances that made him feel that he could not be there. That means something went wrong inside him. So don't ever blame yourself for it. Don't look for nobody to blame. Humanize his situation. Figure out a way to say, I understand that something happened with him. I may not understand why he left, but I understand something happened in him that caused him not to have to be here.
Yeah.
And try to be appreciative of the fact. So I'll tell you this, that does damage a lot of men, but it does produce a lot of powerful men. One of the most powerful men he produced on the planet, not having his father physically in his life, is the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan.
Mm-hmm.
We have men like him. We have many great men who, if they really considered it, if they had their fathers, they would not be here. Does that mean they still would not wish to have that relationship? That's not what that doesn't mean. But that means you've been prepared for a particular circumstance that only you can get through. Don't look for the problem in this. Look for the solution in it.
Evolution. That's powerful. Yeah, because if sometimes even though situations may not go the way we want, sometimes the way it went what made us who we are today. So as we close out and we go on to the last couple questions, I know. So sorry about that. Um, so you're a dad, right? And you talk about how you experienced the same thing that kind of happened to you, right? During the time that you ended up being incarcerated, that you were taken away from your son for a couple years, right? And so how did you forgive yourself for kind of going through the same cycle that you experienced as a young kid? I know that kind of goes into the last one, but.
First, I'm going to say I wasn't taken away from my son.
Mm-hmm.
I gave up my position to be in
Mm-hmm.
his life, and that's a difference.
Mm-hmm.
The only person that can be taken from something is someone who's been kidnapped or somebody who's been killed. Kidnapped means you were took against your will. Killed means you were robbed of your life. But when you're in my circumstance where you made a decision that has a consequence, you voluntarily put yourself in that position.
Mm.
It's not the other way around. Does that mean I wanted to go to prison? No, that's not what that means. But what that does mean, though, is I didn't put myself in a position where I couldn't be put there. That takes a level of accountability to say that my position wasn't taken from me. I gave it up.
Yeah.
What it took for me to forgive myself was necessary. I am a firm believer that me being where I was at was necessary to my journey. One, I like to always attribute this to my roots. Because me not having the physical identity as those around me, I never truly belonged. But since I had the heart from my mother, I had a level of empathy for my people. These are my people. But I had to go through every walk of life to really understand the condition of my people, whether it be homelessness, whether it be poverty, whether it be incarceration. For me to truly have the heart I have for Black people, my people, and to be able to serve and love my people, that means I needed to see every condition and circumstance my people went through. Like I wasn't homeless for like a couple of days or homeless. We went through homelessness for periods of time. We went through a poverty for a long period of time, incarceration for a period of time. But what that did was soften my heart. For most people, it hardens their heart and puts them on survival mode. But it was because of the example of my mother and the teachers we was raised under, and thankfully for even being allowed to have those teachers of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Minister Honorable Luz Farrakhan from an early age, whether I knew it or not, all those helped soften my heart. And literally living in the same circumstance of the people I was born to serve allowed me to see things from my people's perspective. Now, me having the face of the people I didn't have the opportunity to grow up with has given me the opportunity to walk inside their doors and see now life from their point of view. But it now allows me to compare and contrast the two different environments on what makes us different, but the things that make us also the same.
So being able to serve on a whole nother level, and a full circle, right? Being able to see what someone else's hardships are instead of judging them, being able to say, hey, I can relate or I understand where you're coming from, and ultimately really going to that leadership. Thank you for that. And then I want to ask, so what's, because you talk about your son, and I love the story about you even saying how you want to bring him to the darkness to kind of face that fear with you. And so now that you are reconnected with your son, what is the most important thing you want your son to learn from you and from your life today? What's that one thing that you're like, if he could take away one thing, what would it be?
The one thing I want my son to take away, well, it's a tough one. I want my son to learn the same lessons I learned, but not the same way. I want him to learn the truth. I don't want him to make somebody else's truth a definitive truth without no evidence, without no proof. And like my son is raised in a Christian household. I'm not against the Christian faith. However, I do believe the principles that he's raised under is the same principles that helped enslave our people and continue that slavery. Like my son has this issue where I've recognized a level of cowardice in him because of these principles. And I'm thinking, like, I don't know what y'all raising over here, but nah. Like there was a situation where he was in school. He said he had a bully, and I asked him, "So what you do about it?" He said, "I told him. I said, hey, look here, bro. This is the only thing that's gonna happen when you tell on people. You always gonna be looked at as a coward. And what you get in life, what you fight for, is what you deserve. So if you don't do nothing, and I mean actually definitive to yourself, you deserve what comes with it. I'm not telling you what to do, but I'm telling you what's going to continue to happen. So you need to figure out a more productive action. And if need be, if that even meant like having to put hands on somebody, you a man. Like I gave my son the lesson of the apple seed. Any seed, period. When we see a seed, we're not necessarily looking at a seed. We're looking at a tree that hasn't yet reached its full potential. So when I look at my son, I don't see a boy. I see a man that hasn't reached his potential yet. So the lesson I always want to be is seek truth. Find out what truth is. Like I'm a member of the Nation of Islam, newly registered, and I was raised under nation teachings, even though I didn't know it at the time, which probably made it easier for me to accept these teachings. But even after when I first started coming into the fold of the Nation of Islam, because of an immature mindset I had at the time and concepts I couldn't wrap myself around, I defected. But I never defected from Islam, nor did I start to go out my way to embrace a different concept of Islam. I started studying all the truths. Well, not all, because we'll never know all of them. But a good percentage of the truths that the Most High created. Like, what did the Most High create outside of Islam? For a whole year and a half, I studied Christianity. Now, granted, I still make my salats, my pledge, and my faith is in Islam, but I wanted to see how much do I really believe in this faith if I don't test it. So I
Mhm.
started that concepts. Then I studied Hindu concepts. I studied Buddhist concepts. Then I started to move into the Afro ancestral teachings, particularly the Kemetic science in the Ifa faith.
Yep.
And those are actually what started to bring me back into the fold of the Nation of Islam, that what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said was truth.
Hmm.
One of those things, particularly, was the family structure. So when I started to come into those truths, and then I started to pay attention to other people who study various truths but end up back on the path, that's how I got back onto the path and now into the nation. But it wasn't something I just took at face value. I took my time to actually seek truth, compare truths, find out where I believe the absolute truth lies at.
Hmm.
So that's the lesson I want to do, is find your truth. Don't let a truth just simply be something I say or your mother says or someone else says. Go out your way to prove it. In the nation, we say we live by actual facts. That means we don't go by opinions, we don't go by inferences, we go by what's proven. So if this is proven, this is what we live by, this is what we stand by. If it's not proven, this is nothing, this is something that's just left for conversation, but not left for application.
Got it. So you want him to really know what he's standing on, and really, like you said, give that space to find his truth. That was a very interesting perspective to listen to. Also, I'm learning. I mean, I know we're about to close out, but I'm even learning because I'm a Christian, and like just to kind of hear like the journey that you went on, the truths that you went to find for yourself in the journey. I kind of went on a very similar journey of all those different things you said. So it's just interesting just to hear the journey of you and how you landed here, from your life situation to finding peace with your dad, to finding leadership with your kid, and learning how to really come into that space. And so I want to say thank you for taking the time to meet today. Thank you for taking the time to have a conversation. And the last thing I want to ask you is, what's next for you, right? Like, because you're, oh wait, before I do that, so when did you get out? Because I was looking at the timeline. I'm like, you made a big transformation in a short amount of time. When did you get out from incarceration?
I got out of prison. I got out of prison twice.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
The first time I got out was mentally, then the second time was physically.
Explain
I
that.
got out of prison mentally somewhere around 2000, the end of 2019, beginning of 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And that was after I came in contact with this man. Ironically, he was in the Nation of Islam. Actually, a lot of my greatest influences while I was in prison, who I got the most gain from,
Mm-hmm.
they were all members of the Nation of Islam,
Mm-hmm.
or somebody that may have been in the nation, but for their own reason defected, but they never really defected from the teachings, just their active status. But it was after I came in contact with this man who went by the name Jesus.
Mm.
And I met him at that time period where I was stuck. I was reading all type of different books, but I wasn't growing. I wasn't getting anywhere. I just felt stagnant. And he had a really great reputation, but because of where I was at, a lot of the people who had so-called great reputations didn't meet the bar. So when everybody hyped him up to me, I didn't like, it is what it is. I don't really care. So an event happened to where me and him end up getting in contact with each other. And he came up to me, he said, out of all these Muslims here, you're the only one that did what you did, but nobody else did it. And I told him, I said, because I'm a Muslim, bro. That's just enough for me. I don't need nothing more but that.
Mm.
And after that, he said, I want to study. I want to teach you.
Mm.
So he watched me study. He watched me read all these books. He said, brother, I know that you're very studious. I said, yeah, I'd like to keep the mind occupied, like to learn. He looked at me, he said, all those books you read ain't gonna teach you nothing though.
Mm.
That's kind of an opposite statement you used to hearing, because black people, something here growing up is you want to hide the truth, put it in the book.
Yep.
So that kind of baffled me for a moment. So I'm like, what are you talking about? He said, you can read all the books you want, but you'll never really learn until you learn how to read life.
Mm.
And I didn't really know what that meant at the time. So one day he took me to a window And he had me watch the outside. There's rabbits, there's birds. And he said, I just want you to stay here for about 30 minutes to an hour. And I thought this dude was crazy. So then one day he came up to the window and he said, do you notice anything? I said, yes, animals. I don't know what I'm doing here. He said, pay real attention to the birds. So I'm watching the birds. The birds are in a circle, and there's two birds in the middle fighting. And he told me, he said, this is mating season right now. All those birds in the circle are the female birds. And the two birds fighting in the middle are males. He said, what those two birds right now are doing are fighting to see who's worthy of a mate. Because what that mate symbolizes is the regeneration of the next cycle of life. And the one that does not win is the one whose legacy dies right here. And I watched one bird peck the other one to death. And so that bird eventually flew off. The bird that won, all the female birds flew behind him. The one that lost, he flew alone. And it was with the little lessons right there where I started to learn how to pay attention to Allah's creation. To the extent one day I'm in the yard and I could hear this wailing. And it's like alarm, it's like a loud cry. And I'm asking people, do you hear what's going on? And everybody's looking at me crazy, like, what did you talking about? I said, you don't hear that wailing? And everybody's looking at me crazy. But only one person came up to me, and he didn't even hear none of my conversations. He came up to me and said, don't worry, brother, I hear it too. And it's the brother I had been studying. He said, what you're hearing is the earth cry. The earth itself is a living organism. It's in pain. He said they can't hear it because they didn't sever their connection with Allah, and they didn't put their connection to God to a book. But when you were born, you wasn't born with a book in your hand. You was just born living.
Wow.
My physical release was October 5th, 2022, one day before my birthday. That's why I explained to my people I was literally reborn. You're taught me to get up. You're not free when you walk out the doors. You're free once you wake up no longer in prison. So I woke up on my birthday.
Wow. So you're coming up on a year now.
Oh, it's past now.
Oh, that was 22, 23.
Yeah,
Okay.
October 5th, 2023 marks a year. The ironic thing about that week, October 4th is the day I got accepted into the Nation of Islam. October 5th was my year anniversary. October 6th was my first birthday, my first rebirthday.
Wow.
And then October 7th was the birthday of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, our eternal leader.
Wow. So October, the month of blessings and greatness for you. I'm sure every year from now on will be that way.
You know, and it's ironic because October was always the month of grief for me. Some of my worst events in my life always happened in October.
Wow.
So I never cared for birthdays. But this past in October was one of the most eventful ones I've had that was so vital to my growth. Wow. That now October is going to have a different perspective for me. Not saying that, you know, come next October, something tragic may not happen, but tragic may be necessary. Mm-hmm. Like and always, my bad, Queen.
No, you're fine. I'm sorry. I just got excited from what you said. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Keep going.
I was just going to say, every tragedy that ever happened in my life was necessary.
Wow. Well, that's beautiful. Well, I'm happy belated. Do you celebrate birthdays?
As a Muslim, we technically don't celebrate birthdays.
Okay.
But each person, realistically, everybody has their preference. We'll say this. There's Muslims that celebrate their birthday. They may not tell you that openly, but me personally, I just worked on my birthday. I literally worked all day.
Okay. And then, and also I seen, so what are you doing now for work? Like I seen, I think you do serve, like you're in the community, you work in the community now?
I do security. As my current occupation, I do security.
Okay.
But what
Nice.
I do in the community, we do a lot of community service. But us being the nation, we're for the resurrection of our people.
Mhm.
Every day, all day. That never ends. That's not saying we're perfect in that. There's
Mhm.
some days some of us may mess up. I'm one of those. I'm not perfect in it. But the overall goal is the resurrection of our people. The resurrection itself is okay, but the resurrection of the community is what we want better. That's why this book means so much to me and what it stands for, because the nation begins with the family. If we have broken family, we have a broken nation. That's why we have a lot of the problems we have now in our nation. Whether it's these dudes, school shootings, we have dudes out here raping, we have females out here prostituting themselves or being kidnapped and prostituted. All of our situations can literally damn near be traced back to the family.
Mhm.
So whatever family trauma you're dealing with, it's more likely going to be the pain you put out in the world. Like I was having a conversation today with one of the women in the Tigrayan community. That's a ethnic group in my father's native country. It's also the ethnic group my father belonged to.
Mhm.
And we're talking about the current war that's going on in Ethiopia. And she believes there's another war that's about to break out. And she was saying, I hope that war doesn't happen. And the part of the things that made my day not the day I preferred was because I was dealing with the trauma of people who were victims of that war. And as I'm talking to her, I told her, I said, wherever peace lives, it can never really be, because pain is always going to live in the hearts of the people that are affected by the war. And usually the people that start the next war are the peoples that were victim of that pain. And
Wow.
that's also some of the issues we deal with here in our own country, in the family. We're all dealing with some type of pain. That's why we don't know peace. That's why we don't know what it really means to be compassionate, to be merciful, because everybody is dealing with their own form of pain. And then we pass that pain on to the next generation after us. And then there's somebody who had to deal with that pain who's still living in that trauma. That trauma dictates their decisions. And they really believe that they're making a rational, noble decision and fighting for a noble cause when they're just executing the same pain that they've only known and they don't know anything else.
Mhm.
So usually the next suspects of a war were the victims of one themselves. The
Mhm.
same people that destroy a family are the same ones that probably came from one that was destroyed in the first place. That's why, and a lot of people ask me about this, and I'm actually surprised you didn't ask me about it when David Shands came to me the week. Hey, first shout out to that brother. I love that brother to death. Like that is
Yes.
a true
Yes.
brother right there. But one of the things he mentioned when he was asking me about how do I know I love my father and all these bad events didn't happen, and it really put a perspective about our people in particular, that we don't base our love off of how good people been to us. We base our love off of how evil people can be and how willing we are to forgive them and embrace them. It's almost like battered woman syndrome, where this woman's love off this man isn't based off of how good he's been to her, but she believes that this man beats her because in some aspect he loves her.
Yeah.
And that just shows how traumatized we are as a people, that we really can only believe someone we love somebody if we're willing to let them hurt us. And that was one of those things I feel as a people that we got to learn how to rejuvenate from, getting past that trauma. Part of the reasons I bought this plant today was because I remember hearing a saying, you can never truly love something until you take care of something that doesn't do anything for you. This plant doesn't do anything for me. It doesn't serve any purpose, really. It's just a plant. I'm going to water it, I'm going to feed it, and its life is based off the consistency, the continuation of my care for it. That nurture, that compassion, that's attributes of love. So how can I honestly say and sit here and say I'm willing to take care and love on something that does nothing for me, but I have relatively no love for the individual that's responsible for me being here in the first place and being able to be the example I am. It doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to get past your own traumas first. And that can be anything, whether it's traumas with your people, your mother, your father, your brothers, your sister, somebody that may have hurt you. You got to get past that trauma at some point. It's going to be a hindrance. Or if you don't be careful, you're going to end up being the exact same person executing that same pain to somebody else.
That was powerful. Well, people, you have heard it here for Ibraheim Mallese. Am I saying it right?
No, but you know there. So we're going to
I'm
keep it
sorry, I tried
simple.
to say it right. Mallese.
Mallese.
Mallese, okay, Mallese. There we go. I'm also known as IAM, and I want to say thank you for taking the time to come on to the Perfect People podcast. Y'all, he's the reason why I even came out of hibernation and booted this. So I'm excited, and I'm hoping to see you back here. This is the beginning, but just know that this platform is always open to you as you drop more books and all the greatness that you're going to do in the future. And I just want to say what's next for you, and then also where can we find you on social media? Where can we find your book? Because they definitely need to go and get the book. And so, let us know.
Well, what's next for me? On November 18th, I'm doing a small family event. If you're in Atlanta, Georgia, at Akira Cafe, November 18th, we're having an event called Black Family Day. It's a day for the family. I'll be one of the speakers there. Alongside, you're going to have poets there. You're going to have musicians there. December 14th, I'm going to be competing in the last Slick Talk Poetry Contest before my guy moves to LA. Shout out to my brother Culture. And I plan on winning this one. And then the last one, so I got to take it out with a bang. You can find me on Instagram at NUKPU_IAM. The book. Now, this is what I do for people, and I'm going to let you actually attest to this yourself. Let the people know what I do.
I have my copy right here. You can buy it on Amazon, but I brought it straight from IAM, and I got my sign right here. So I have a personalized one. And it came in about 3 days. So I would say definitely reach out to him if you want to DM him. He makes sure these books come out and get yours personalized. Be one-on-one, get yours. And like I said, it was worth every page. Like I never read like the introduction and all of that in books, but I literally read this book page from page. That's how good it was. So yes.
I'm glad you did because I'm the same way. I see introduction in my mind that says the end.
Yes, but yeah. I read it all this time. So I want to say again, thank you for coming on the show and just sharing your story. I'm sure that you might be the reason why a lot of young men or women start to do that healing with their dad, or dads start to think about how they can heal, and families start to come back together because this conversation is so important. And thank you for taking the time to write the book. And thank you for taking the time to share your transparency. Is there anything you want to say to the people before we close?
This is a saying I want to leave with y'all. Right now, we're in the age of I am. That means the age of being who you are. You can't be an I am if you continue to live in the mindset of I was. Mm-hmm. Peace and blessings.
Yes, thank you all. We're out. Thank you. Hold on, I'm trying to.
All right, bet.
Hold on, I don't know what I'm doing. Sorry, there we go.